you're not in sales. You're not in the business of selling. You're in the business of helping. And if the person you're sitting across from is not a good fit for any reason, move on to the next. That's okay. There's people out there who need your services. Stop trying to sell. And it's interesting because oftentimes I'll tell a prospect that, I don't know if you're a good fit for us. And what? What do you mean? Aren't you here to try to sell me something? No, I'm interviewing you just like you're interviewing me, to make sure that there's mutual benefit there.
Yeah, yeah, you you can't fit everyone's needs and desires as well as they can't always fit your needs and what you offer.
Hmm.
And if you go in with the mentality that I'm going to be everything to everyone, then you're not going to be great at the one thing. And to your point, it takes maturity and confidence to go into a room and say, yes, you guys are interviewing me, but I'm also interviewing you. This is a
Hmm.
two-way street here because I'm not going to take on a client that doesn't fit this, and that. Right. All right, here we go. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Willpower himself.
Absolutely, man. So let's get into it. We're going to talk a lot about HR today. But before we get into that, you are from Wisconsin. You ended up going to NDSU, playing for the Bison. How did you go from Wisconsin to NDSU?
It's funny when I was getting recruited, high school, face down, right? You just don't pay attention to your surroundings. And my surroundings, way on the periphery included the Dakotas, but they were not on my radar at all. As a matter of fact, I remember in eighth grade social studies class, we had to write an article arguing our point of what should we do with this nuclear waste problem that we've got in the United States of America. And my argument as a 15-year-old boy in Appleton, Wisconsin was, just stick it in North Dakota. Nobody lives there anyways. And ironically, fast forward 5 years later, and I was living here full time. I pulled into Fargo in the fall of 1991 as a bright-eyed inbound freshman, and of course, the rest of the story is I met a girl and never left. Fargo and the Dakotas, Sioux Falls is my second home. And I tell you what, underrated. People in the Milwaukee, Chicago, Green Bay Metro, really, and other places, they don't know what they're missing. It's God's country by my definition, and I'm tickled to be here, where relationships and reputation really does make a difference.
Absolutely. It's one of those things where people on the coast in these big cities away from the Dakotas, they look at South Dakota, North Dakota as flyover country. And I just love how the Dakotas continue to evolve and prove those people wrong. I mean, even I had a friend from New York that came to Sioux Falls for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, "This place is amazing." Like it totally transformed their perception of being here in Sioux Falls and in the Dakotas. And it's like people have no idea what they're missing out on here in this area.
I've got family that comes in for the 4th of July every year from the Chicago Metro and the Denver Metro and Grand Rapids, Michigan. And when they're in Minnesota Lakes territory, they look around and they say, "Where are all the people?"
Mm.
It's beautiful when you walk into a cafe and you recognize three or four people. I tell you what, that sense of community, and honestly, well, I didn't realize how deep my roots were in the region until I was diagnosed with cancer. I was diagnosed with cancer 11 years ago, and obviously I'm here. But during that moment, you realize how much community does matter. 800 people showed up to my benefit. I tear up when I tell the story. Will, sorry to open with that, but
No, this is
I had some high
great.
school classmates come in from Milwaukee and Phoenix, and a friend of mine flew in from Baltimore, and they were just astounded. You just don't see that sense of community in the bigger markets. And I say that because I've heard it, not because I've lived it. Really, you don't notice community all that much in high school because your high school is your community. Same thing with college, but boy, once you hit stride in your professional life and you have an opportunity to really lean on that community, man, it makes a big difference. And my friends that live in the big markets are jealous.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to touch on this cancer piece here shortly, but to your point about community, you know, sometimes it takes leaving your home, leaving where we're from, the Dakotas, to understand what you really have and what that sense of community
Hmm.
actually means. That was the case for me when I graduated from USD, tried to make the NFL, didn't make the NFL, and then went and lived over in Europe for 3 years, and lived in Mexico for several years, and had the time of my life. But it wasn't until I came back where I'm like, wow, this sense of community, this town, these people mean something. I'm happy being home. Relationships mean something.
Hmm.
And that is why I'm still here today, because of that sense of community. It's such a powerful thing that is
Hmm.
underrated in the eyes of, I think, many, many people. And sometimes it takes leaving to actually understand what is
If
truly
there's anybody who takes advantage of community, well, it's got to be you. When we're sitting at Josiah's in downtown Sioux Falls, sometimes I feel like I'm sitting with a celebrity.
here.
3 minutes of conversation take place before somebody comes over and whacks you in the back and says, "What's up, Willpower?"
Yeah, that's got some pros and cons at time when we're trying to have a productive meeting, and
That's
I'm
great.
constantly, yeah, no, it's good. So, but touching on the cancer piece, Jason, talk about what happened, how you talk about the diagnosis, and then how you overcame it, and what that
Sure,
has meant to you, and how you look at life now.
sure. Um, Warning you, I'm probably gonna tear up a little. It's funny. Months and months and months go by where I just don't think about it, right? And then when somebody asks me to kind of recount it, it just brings back some pretty raw emotions. But it's a weird story as to how I was diagnosed. I used to run marathons quite a bit, and everywhere I went, I'd bring my running shoes, a shorts shirt, and a $5 bill in case I twisted an ankle and needed to take a cab home to wherever that was, in a hotel room or wherever else. I was down in uh, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, out for a run. I was probably about 10 miles away from our all-inclusive resort and felt like I got shot. I wasn't exactly sure. I thought maybe I'd pulled a muscle. I had never had a lateral oblique strain before, and I just chalked it up to that and had some pretty acute pain. Well, it turns out my appendix had burst in Mexico, right? Great place to have that happen. So, when you grow up it serves as a detriment overall in life, but when you grow up in a pretty macho football type environment, rub some dirt on it carries through to adult life as well. And
Oh yeah.
broken ribs, broken fingers, all the stuff. You just kind of your pain tolerance increases over time as you recognize that mental toughness is probably just as important as anything as it relates to physical pain. So, got back to the hotel. We were flying out the next morning, and I just bit a towel and just dealt with it. Right. Well, people that have been through an appendix burst will tell you, what you did what, and was flying back through Minneapolis, and spent the night. My wife took off and headed back home. I spent the night because I was committed to do the polar plunge the next day down in Prior Lake, Minnesota, and was headed to a wedding that night on Saturday night. And the wedding, ironically, was the wedding of a friend of mine who was marrying a medical oncologist. I called him and said, "Hey, I can't make it." Called and canceled the polar plunge thing, and shivered in my hotel room all night long with a fever. Made it back up to Fargo, and finally my wife talked me into going to the hospital on Tuesday. So it happened on a Friday. Sat around till Tuesday. Just about killed me. I was just about septic. They did instantaneous or immediate emergency surgery on me. What would have been a pretty routine appendix laparoscopic process was about a 3-hour soupy mess. And they discovered while they were in there that, hey, I had cancer. So the cancer that was discovered was on my ascending colon, which is I lost about a third of my guts as a result of that. Went through some chemo and another major surgery as a follow on to that. But yeah, thanks be to God that I had that appendix rupture. Otherwise, the survival rate of the type of cancer that I had, which was appendiceal carcinoma, was pretty small, because typically it just grows unnoticed until it's too late. Now I'm on the survivorship committee at Sanford, so anybody up and down the I-29 corridor between Fargo and Sioux Falls that's diagnosed, just because it is such a rarity, when I go visit with somebody that has been diagnosed, they have an opportunity to touch and feel and see that, hey, there's hope, right? You can make it through this thing. I tell them about, hey, I'm still skiing and running and doing some things, and pretty active and healthy, and you can beat it too. It's my opportunity to pay it back a little bit and help folks that have been diagnosed, and gives me a chance to tell a little bit of my faith story too.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Wow. What a journey, man. And rewinding back to that suck it up attitude
Mm,
is good, but it can be a detriment for
for
guys
sure.
like you
Yeah.
who, you're in pain, but you're like, this isn't anything I haven't experienced. Like, I can fight through this. It'll go away in a couple of days. And
Yeah.
because of the football days, you already have a high pain tolerance, right? So you might be suffering a bit, but you're like, this is nothing. I can get through it. I mean, it's a balancing act when you talk about that suck it up attitude, because same thing happened with my father. He had side aches for several months, and he was coughing up fluid, and he
Mm,
didn't go to the doctor. Well, when he finally went to the doctor, it was stage 4 lung cancer. He had hundreds of tumors in his lungs, and it was too late. And
yeah.
so it's absolutely a balancing act. I'm stoked that you made it through. What has that experience, how do you look at life now differently, from being diagnosed with cancer to seeing your life flash between your eyes
Yeah.
to before?
It's I'd love to tell you that there was some magical transformation. That there really wasn't. I've got probably a better sense of community, like I mentioned, and a better sense of daily gratitude. I blogged extensively during the journey, and my last blog post was, "Hey, I'm back to normal, and I'm not sure that's a good thing." And I meant that because I'm sorry, Will. There was days where I was happy to be awake, right? Because I was sleeping like 20, 22 hours a day sometimes. And I went out and bought it, just a killer bed. It's just
Of
still
course.
around today, 10 years later. But man, if I was out of bed and able to interact with my kids a little bit, I was just grateful. And then it got to be, wow, I made it downstairs today. Or hey, I get to sit on the front porch and watch my kids bike up and down the street. And after a while, after my recovery process was kind of complete, then I was back at work and griping about emails and normal everyday things. And God, it's cold outside. I got to stop and get gas. I started, instead of having that just continual heart of gratitude, I kind of got back into normal mode. So that last blog post of, hey, I'm back to normal and I'm not sure if that's a good thing, that did have an impact on me for sure. But I was always a pretty good husband. I was always a pretty good dad, and was um, just it didn't sometimes you see Hollywood movies of the type A Hollywood stockbroker that starts to recognize that people aren't tools to be used, and I was just never that kind of guy in the first place. So it had an impact on me for sure. And I'm grateful to be around, but more than anything, I'm grateful that my kids have a dad and that my wife has a husband. You can never get a new dad, right? I know where I'm going at some point in time, whether I was 40 or whether I'm 80 when I go there. But um, my wife can even get a new husband if that happens, but my kids can't get a new dad. And that was my biggest concern at the time was, hey, what's going to happen to them? It's going to scramble their eggs. So for them, I'm glad to be around.
Well, I am incredibly glad too, Jason. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and having fun over dinner, and you're just a powerful presence. And thank God you made it through, brother.
Yeah, me
So,
too. Thanks, man.
and that reminds me of the quote that says, "Health is the crown on the well person's head that only the ill person can see." And I think in general, many times we take for granted our health until it's
For
gone.
sure. Yeah. You don't walk around every day and say, I'm sure glad not to be on fire. Right?
Hmm.
Or I sure am glad that I have got two thumbs. You just don't think about those things every day until you don't have them. Or in the most ridiculous example, when you are on fire, you wish you weren't, or when you're not healthy. But yeah, that's, I guess, you asked, hey, what type of impact? I think I take my health a lot more seriously. I'm a lot better with my nutritional intake than I probably was back in the day. But I think that's probably just an evolution of society as well. Maybe age, but I think as a consumer, the average American is more aware of the ultra processed foods and the things that they put into their body now in the year 2025 than they probably were in the year 2014 when I was diagnosed.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I mean, even I had the flu a couple of weeks ago, and I was like I mean, I was bedridden. I had no
Yeah.
energy. I was really struggling. And it's not until you get into those moments where you're really hurting, where you're like, wow, I don't value my health enough, because right now this sucks. And then when I
Mhm.
when I was healthy the next week, I'd wake up with a smile on my face, like, oh, thank God I got through a night of sleep. I feel wonderful and I'm ready to take on the day.
Yeah.
So again, that quote, "The health is the crown on the well person's head that only the ill person can see," is so
Yeah.
relevant. So, well, let's segue, Jason. You are the managing director of the South Dakota office for Pro Resources, and you guys deal heavily in HR. And so I'm fascinated with HR. There's many elements of HR that blend with what I do at EOS. So I'm stoked to dive into this. So for all the people out there that maybe aren't very business savvy, HR, what is HR and why is it important?
Yeah, I think most people probably recognize the term HR as human resources, and sometimes for those that aren't involved in business leadership, they think of HR as the police that'll make sure they're not telling dirty jokes in the break room or treating people with respect. And that's part of it for sure. We as a business, just kind of our value statement, if you will, is we provide an outsourced HR department for small businesses that don't have one. A company the size of, say, Stanford, as a big example, they've got an HR department of probably 40 people, and those people are in place to make sure that their employees are taken care of as human beings, to make sure that those people have a good workplace experience. But in business, the bottom line is always the bottom line. And at Sanford or any other business, the reason they're able to cost justify an entire HR department is because of the expense of turnover and the liability that can come along with having employees. HR, first of all, big companies don't love their employees any more than small companies do. As a matter of fact, the argument could be made to the contrary that small businesses really value their employees because they're more intimate with them. Organizations that have 40, 50, maybe 100 employees, they know every employee by name. And not picking on Sanford, but most the CEO of Sanford probably doesn't know employee number 1327, right?
It's
Their
impossible.
numbers on paper. But yeah, it's just impossible. So, how does a small business compete for employees if Sanford offers a better overall workplace experience? And when I talk about that, I talk about culture, I talk about benefits, I talk about treating people with humans and hearing situations and dealing with them. It directly impacts productivity and efficiency when you've got the right people in the right roles, and when you honor those people and handle situations as they arise within an organization, it's crucial. HR is also, well, first of all, let me rewind a little bit. An HR department has a 401k administrator, a benefits administrator, has a wellness coordinator, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Has a mental health coach because everybody goes through something in life where maybe they need a therapist of some sort. We offer all of those things. We offer an HRIS platform, a way to track time, punch in, punch out, grab last year's W-2 statement, see how much PTO you've got left. Hey, what's my balance on my HSA or FSA account? The risk mitigation that comes along with it, we're a little bit different than the standard HR outsourcer. Most of our competitors that say they provide HR outsourcing, they just mean handbooks and compliance type stuff. We do that too. Kind of our magic elixir is the whole department aspect of it, including safety. We'll provide safety training, building inspections to make sure that you don't have a TIG welder next to some explosives, the same type of thing that maybe OSHA would get after you for. We do that proactively to reduce the likelihood of a risk or injury. If there is an on-campus injury of some sort, managing that is super important. Somebody, cut their finger. Well, that can turn into an infection, can turn into a huge claim. So we get involved in post-accident investigation and safety training, maybe for those blue-collar organizations. Here's how to operate a forklift safely. Here's how to cut tile with the proper silica and hearing protection. So all of those things are found inside of an HR department, and we offer all of those things to a small business for usually, maybe 60%, 70% the cost of, or sometimes 20% the cost of an internal HR person. The reason it can be so inexpensive is because of hard cost offsets. Maybe they're overpaying for workers' compensation insurance, or maybe we can save them a buck or two on their 401k. Maybe they already have some technology in place that they can ditch because we provide it. So an HR department is kind of a mix of all of those things. How any individual organization consumes it is really up to them. We don't force our way on any one of our clients, but overall, we've got about 8,500 employees that through their employer map to us. The last thing that can come along there is there's some buying power. If an organization joins us, we're able to provide some collective savings on some of those, potentially some collective savings on those things like 4K and maybe some benefits. We're not there to steal anybody's. We're not there to really take benefits as part of our everyday offering. But if we can save a buck, great. If they really like working with their benefits provider, our message on that is great. Stick with them. We'll just simply help you facilitate and administer those benefits. But boy, I tell you what, you do a good job of showing your employees appreciation, and turnover plummets. Productivity increases. If you've got a well staff, meaning well, meaning healthy, they're less likely to use the medical plans, cost mitigation there. They're less likely to quit and leave the organization because they feel that appreciation. They're less likely to have an on-the-job injury because maybe their brain is firing on all 12 cylinders. That by contrary, you get an employee who every single day eats a gas station burrito and chugs a 2 liter of Mountain Dew. Well, they're probably not operating on all 12 cylinders. And those are the guys and gals that are most likely to trip on an extension cord and break their leg. So there's the work comp piece. And of course, there's the productivity piece. If their body is running well, they're more likely to operate well as well. So we bring our wellness team and we have conversations. We'll cook meals for our clients and say, hey, you can do this too. Oftentimes we'll walk in with, $100 of garbage food and $100 of really good food, all of which was procured at the gas station down the road where they're eating their break food. Hey, you can eat a boiled egg, you can eat some cheese sticks and some jerky versus a Kit Kat and a gas station burrito. So eat this, not that is part of our message. So it's really fun. It's super rewarding to bring all of these things to a business. The employees appreciate it and the employers appreciate the bottom line impact.
Yeah, awesome. Well, just so much good stuff there. But what I want to touch on first is, at what point does a small to medium sized business say, okay, we need to start, we need to engage Jason in pro resources? Like, what is that point at which they want to engage you or they need
Yeah.
to?
That's a good question. I think that there's some organizations that just they don't have any part of it. Most organizations, as they're moving from super small to say small, 5 employees to say 10 employees, at some point in time, most business founders are going to say, listen, I didn't get into business so that I could get good at HR. I didn't get into business so that I could get really good at IT. I didn't get into business so that I could be really good at marketing. And those are three obvious areas where organizations outsource on the regular. So for the founder who really wants to spend his or her time focused on growing the business, that's the appropriate time to bring us in. And some people realize that at the 10th employee. Sometimes they realize that at the 40th employee. We hear from time to time that, oh yeah, I've got HR covered. Bob over here, he's my HR guy. And then we'll start asking questions. Okay, what's Will, what's Bob doing for you? And then when we distill it down, Bob's maybe doing payroll, and Bob's maybe helping people on board. But if we can prove that Bob is better used someplace else and that we can do a better job than Bob, didn't mean to rhyme there,
Mhm.
in the category of HR, it's pretty easy to justify our expense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, people tend to be the number one asset to an organization and
Hmm.
also bring all the issues, right? And so employee retention is an issue that all CEOs, all employers talk about. They're worried about keeping their employees happy, keeping on staff. And then also they're worried about recruiting awesome employees to their team. We can't find enough great employees. There's just not enough in the market. Well, oftentimes there is some validity to that, but also oftentimes it's because they don't have a rock star HR department to go out and get those people and recruit them to the organization. And so it's always mind boggling to me when an owner or a president doesn't take HR seriously. What could be more important? Obviously, you have your core business, what made you the money, which is what you deliver to your customers, but keeping your people content, making sure that they are set up for success, making sure that that 401k, their benefits are all aligned and providing massive benefit to them. You better be doing that, or these rock stars you have in your organization, they are going to leave without question.
So if a founder spends his or her time focused on those things, then they're taking their eye off the ball. Let's just say it's an HVAC company, right? And Will, you own the HVAC company. You've only got so much time in the day. So you can either spend your time working, and HR has some paperworky type stuff too, payroll and, tax reporting, garnishments, and the administration of benefits and plans. You can spend your time over here, or you can spend your time pursuing. You've got a limited amount of time in your day and you need to do it all as a founder. So it can be a real challenge. Sometimes just like I'll call it auto insurance. Sometimes you don't realize the value of your auto insurance until you get a fender bender, right? And if it's a fender bender, maybe your car insurance is worth 10 grand because you got a wrecked bumper and a front quarter panel. But maybe your car insurance is worth $250,000 because you had, something more significant, an injury related accident. And we literally take on the liability of having employees on paper. And really only on paper, we become an administrative co-employer. And that's hard for people to wrap their arms around a little bit. So we're not just bringing an HR department to a small business. According to the South Dakota Department of Revenue, according to the IRS, we, Pro Resources, along with the HVAC founder, we co-employ those employees. So if there's a discriminatory termination claim that's filed against that business, you got to come through us first. We literally hold the shield for the employees and mitigate risk associated. Now, sure, there's a million other benefits as well. Sometimes people say, "Oh my gosh, that's enough. Let's forget about it. You'll help me with the liability piece." Yep, we sure will. And sometimes that's enough. And other times, people say, "Oh wow, the HR culture benefits, that's enough." And we forget to talk about the liability protection. But there's a million different reasons that people will engage us. And it's hard to know sometimes as to where we should spend our time and energy in conversation, at least. And people, I think they grow in their appreciation for us as they get to know us over the course of time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, HR is such a vast department, I guess, within an organization. And so, yeah, you guys are covering many, many aspects. And to your point about the owner, president who started the company, like, of course, HR is on the back burner, when they're trying to grow this company. It's just, again, it's not a part of their core business. It's not the product
Yeah.
or service they're offering. And so they're like, HR, like, that's not making me more money. But it's that realization that you just mapped out of, okay, what happens when someone gets hurt? What happens when we have to fire someone and have the proper documentation? What happens when we lose key employees that now we can't fill this position for 6 to 10 months?
Hmm.
That right there is where the value lies. And that is why it's important to have this HR department, whether internal or external, that has their eyes on the ball at all times, that do this for a living so that it saves you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars.
It's, when you own a business, I think that outsiders look and say, "Wow, you lucky dog. You worked your tail off. You reap the rewards of it." But they don't realize how, I think the general population doesn't realize how close business owners are to that cliff of risk for a million reasons. You go to Google right now or YouTube and search how to sue your employer, and there's answers out there, unfortunately. Some other examples are, what do you do when an employee shows up for work intoxicated? Well, you call us and we'll drive over there and we'll help you deal with it. We're not a remote chat bot type thing. Our clients are assigned a dedicated HR manager. And sure, we've got the proactive stuff going through the compliance. What are we doing about paid family medical leave? What are we doing about if you've got employees that work on the other side of the river? What are we doing about legalized marijuana? If employees are over on a service call on the other side of the river, what are we doing about FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act? Okay, the rules have changed. How do we know who's exempt and not exempt from overtime? And do we knee jerk react to that, or do we wait until it plays out in the court system? And yeah, there's just so much that goes into it that an employer, if they really want to do a good job in HR, they've taken their eyes off the business ball. So yeah, it's a lot of fun to be able to deliver those services, and I think clients will join us for a reason or two. And then over the course of time, they recognize I'm getting a lot more than I signed up for, maybe a little bit more than I expected as a result of this engagement. But boy, we've had some stories for sure about organizations that have to deal with this, that, and the other thing. And some of my favorites are, imagine being a small business owner and there's literally a true story, a fist fight in the warehouse. But the fist fight took place between the owner's nephew and the guy that the owner has been playing softball with for 10 years. Small businesses oftentimes have that mix of relations, right? Well, how's a business owner possibly going to preside over a mitigation conversation or a de-escalation conversation? That's an impossible task. And it takes their eye off the ball. So call us, we'll swing over, we'll sit down, we'll interview both, we'll get to the bottom of it. And it doesn't know, we don't have a magic wand, Will. We can't fix everything, but we're trained in best practices on how to handle sticky situations. And that's just another way that we can prove our value.
I've never thought about HR in this light, but having a great HR department or outsourcing HR to you guys it's insurance for the company.
Mhm.
It's literally same as auto insurance for your car. It's insurance for your business, making sure that
Mhm.
all of your ducks are in a row for when things go awry.
Mhm.
Inevitably, things will go awry at some point.
Yep.
Having the squad team in place with those procedures to make sure that it's handled properly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and we hope not to have those insurance type situations, but they pop up. And we've been there, done that a million times over. So we don't have to, we don't have to call an attorney, wait for an answer because we've been through this conversation. No matter what conversation it is, many, many times over, we're able to provide guidance on the spot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and so we've already touched on it a bit previously, but how does an HR department affect the overall culture of an organization?
I think a lot of times culture really does come from inside an organization, but freeing up a founder to focus on, I call it management by walking around. The best way to improve the culture of a business is to spend one-on-one time with each of your employees, whether that's a supervisor engaging his or her employees or an owner engaging his or her employees, spending one-on-one time. I want to know your kid's name. I want to understand what motivates you. I want to understand what's important to you. And if a business owner is too busy dealing with fires, you don't have the time to do that. Now, we can absolutely impact culture by bringing an employer's appetite for a demonstration of appreciation. An appetite doesn't do you any good if you don't do anything about it, right? An owner really does want to show his or her employees that, hey, I really appreciate you as an employee. But what do you do to demonstrate that appreciation? Well, you hire us. We bring in all of those things that we discussed that an HR department in a big company delivers. And that's the first, when I'm on a podium with a business owner introducing pro resources to their staff, that's what I talk about. Hey, your employer over here, Will right here standing next to me, I'm here because Will really appreciates you as employees and wants to bring that Fortune 500 HR department to you. So culture still does come from within, but it starts with sometimes the business owner saying, "Hey, I need some help."
Yeah. I mean, to your point, it's about delegating and elevating as a founder. If you hold on to the responsibilities of wearing 10 hats of HR, of finance, of ops, of building and delivering this service, then your company is going to hit a ceiling and you're not going to be able to push past that ceiling. The only way to push past that ceiling to reach the next level is by delegating and elevating, getting those right people in those street seats, experts that are better than you in a particular field
Yeah,
to fill that role and to provide the insights and the knowledge and the execution to take that completely off your plate or off their
amen.
plate. And again, for you guys to be able to fill that HR role is really, really, really cool in a world where fractional CFOs, fractional COOs, fractional integrators are
Hmm.
becoming more and more popular. It's really interesting that now HR is the next to be
Hmm.
outsourced. So I'm just fascinated by companies' willingness to bring in outside resources to help them do a particular task or run a particular department or a business unit even better.
I'm going to use a couple of EOS terms, Will.
Do it. Give it to me.
So when you talk about right seats, right, is it right seats on the right bus? Is that
Right
I,
people,
I
right
stumbled
people,
that to
right people, right seat.
right people, right seats, son of a gun. While finding somebody who's got the expertise in each of those categories that I talked about, from wellness to post-accident investigation, benefits management, and de-escalation, compliance with emerging laws. Good luck finding somebody who can do all of that stuff, plus run payroll and go fetch a W-2 for somebody that's refinancing a house and answer a call about, okay, now where can I get my root canal that's in network? You're not going to find anybody as a small business owner that can do all of those things. Well, we can do all of those things for less, right? So if you have an appetite to fill that seat with the right person, good luck finding that person that can do all of those things. So right person, right seat. Yeah, good luck finding somebody that can do all those things. And good luck finding the person with GWC, right? Do you want to define that one for us?
Gets it, wants it, capacity.
Okay, gets it. Do they get HR? Do they want HR? And do they have the capacity? And the answer has to be yes to all three of those things in order for that to make sense to hire internally. And Pro Resources, we have the GWC that business owners are looking for in the HR category.
Yeah, yeah. Oftentimes, even if a company finds someone who is right person, right seat, GWC's that seat, it's still so much to take on from an HR perspective with everything that you've already talked about. So even if they do find that person, there's still an opportunity to work with you guys to just maximize the efficiency for that person and not overwhelm that
Hmm.
person with the millions of
Agreed.
tasks that go into HR.
Yeah. For those small businesses that have that really strategic, strong HR leader, hey, free them up to be strategic inside your organization and take the HR help desk responsibilities off of their plate. In those scenarios where we're serving maybe a little bit larger businesses that have internal HR, now we're just HR taskmasters. Now we're doing the administrative type stuff. We're not quite as involved. Maybe we're providing safety, maybe we're not, depending on white collar, blue collar, gray collar, depending on someone's organizational org chart, do they already have a safety department? So really the conversation depends on the need. And what we deliver depends on, holes in their roster. But
Yeah,
it's so
yeah.
fun, Will. I'm loving every bit of this thing over here at Pro Resources. I'm, curiosity and intellectual exercise are always things that get me excited. Every business is just a little bit different, and how we serve them is a little bit different. But one of the most rewarding things is hearing back from our customers that say, "Hey, I'm a better dad, I'm a better wife, I'm a better parent because I don't have to stress as much when I'm at home. I'm present." Oftentimes payroll is run on Sundays. I had a business owner say to me a while ago, "I'm a better dad." And I'm a better Vikings fan because now I have my Sundays back. I don't have to go to the office and run payroll on Sundays. And there's no better compliment than helping somebody where it matters most, and that's in their family life.
That is so cool, Jason. And, I feel the same about my clients and the people that I serve in regards to helping them live the life that they started that business for. Helping
Yeah.
them live a life that was the reason why they started the business, was to create the quality of life, to create the freedom, to be financially secure, to be
Hmm.
able to have the flexibility to be the boss and leave whenever you want to. And all too often what happens is these business owners start the business and the business ends up running the owner, not the other way around, because they're not good at letting go of responsibilities, because they feel so attached to it, and they have this grind mentality where that's all they know. But yet the solution is on the other side of letting go
Hmm.
of all those things, and it's bringing in people like us, me from an EOS standpoint, to help them implement EOS, to have the tools to run a more efficient business and to get the right people in the right seats so they're not stressing out about every little thing that is under their wheelhouse of responsibility. And then obviously people like you to take that HR burden away from them. So it's
Yeah,
one of
or
my favorite
IT
things.
or marketing or whatever it might be. Well, I don't know that I've ever stumbled on an EOS client in the wild who regretted it. It's a discipline, right? It's always difficult to start a new exercise or start a new journey, whatever that might look like, if it's nutrition or business health or whatever it might be. Short-term discomfort, sometimes short-term pain always works in the benefit of long-term gain if you're doing it for the right reasons and you have that end game in mind. And yeah, we lose some customers from time to time, but very, very, very rarely. We our retention rate's 96.2%. I'd be curious to know people that professionally endeavor EOS, what percentage of them abandon the discipline over time. I'd be willing to bet it's pretty darn close to 0%.
Yeah, yeah. The only ones that abandon it don't give it the time to fully implement the system into the business, right? Like maybe
That's
they
that's
do
why I
it.
said professionally implement, right? Because there's some
Yes.
DIYers out there. There's some folks that grab the book Traction and they think they got it figured out, listen to a couple podcasts and off they go. GWC. Okay, if you're gonna DIY, I'm using too many acronyms here, but if you're gonna if you're gonna DIY EOS, you have to GWC. And do you really get it? Do you really? You might want it, but do you have the understanding and the capacity to do it right? And that's why professional implementers exist. So when I asked the question, really what I meant to enunciate was how many organizations that go through professional EOS implementation are still maintaining that practice and discipline 10 years later. And I bet you it's 99.9%.
Yeah, if they make it through 6 months through the process with an implementer, they are likely doing it for the entirety of the company's future, right? It's just,
Yeah.
it makes running business so much easier. And I was that person, Jason, that started off
Hmm.
self-implementing in my football recruiting business. And then when I got to the commercial contractor back in 2021, and I thought I knew everything. I probably wouldn't have even have wanted to hire an implementer at the time because I'm like, I got this.
Sure, sure.
And I was able to help transform that construction company in just a few years just by me self-implementing it. But then when I saw that external EOS implementers were even a thing, I became fascinated and I'm like, I got to know more about this because I've already transformed this company with the EOS principles. And
Hmm.
I don't even know if I'm doing it 100% right. And when I got licensed and felt called to become an implementer, I'm like, wow, I was really half assing everything. So, yes, to your point, having the external implementer to help hold you accountable, who knows EOS in and out, and to make sure that you are running and executing on those tools to the best of your abilities, it's super important in order to successfully roll EOS out to an organization.
Yeah, and it's tough to bring that discipline into an organization because it's not, I say an organization because it's not an endeavor that is owned by a person, right? It's an institutional shift, an institutional tool set. So I don't know. It's fun to see. EOS is spoken like the language of business in Sioux Falls. It seems like everybody knows it, everybody gets it, and everybody says, yeah, I think I probably need to get there sooner or later. And it's cool to
Mm-hmm.
see how US has been embraced by the market.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's a blessing for me. And I know it's the same thing with you with Pro Resources in that both of what we do is industry agnostic.
Hmm.
So we can work with a company who's a manufacturing company, a healthcare company, a construction company, a restaurant group. It doesn't matter the industry because what we do is any company in any
Hmm.
industry. And that's what's been so powerful for me is to have a nonprofit, to have a restaurant group, to have a manufacturing company. And at the core, the business is really the same. You know, you have your basic business units and they're just selling different products and services.
Hmm.
Again, it's what a blessing for us to be able to see all these companies in all these different industries on a daily basis.
It's also interesting, isn't it? How I'm sitting on a chair right now with a broken arm. And when
Mm.
times are, I'm just too lazy to go buy a new one and it works just fine for me. But if I was really pinching pennies in a tight economy, I can sit in an old chair forever. Now, I'm going someplace with this, and both you and I provide services that are of interest to organizations that are growing, that have an appetite to elevate, delegate, that have an appetite for operational excellence and vision casting. That's important for a growing organization, and arguably even more important for an organization that maybe does need to tighten their belt a little bit. So we get calls in both situations. Hey, I need to save some money. Can you help me do that? Or, hey, we're growing like a son of a gun. We're having a hard time keeping up, and I'm going to take Bob, my HR guy, and see if I can get him into a role that's maybe a little bit more strategic for the organization. So it's super fun in both a growth and a bear market.
Absolutely. And I love this conversation, Jason. It's been so fun. And so I'm going to pivot here to more life.
Yeah.
What life advice would you give to your younger self?
It's so I spent 2 decades in the IT space. And young reps at my old company were required on the inbound to call a veteran and interview that veteran. Well, I got a lot of those phone calls. And the advice that I offered the younger people was be confident in the next opportunity. Don't try too hard to convince, not to play on your name, Will, but a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And in the moment, you might be able to convince somebody that you're a good fit, but if you're not, they're going to figure it out pretty quick, and there will be reputation damage. There's time wasted. When I'm sitting across the table from somebody now, it takes about 10-15 minutes of quick conversation to determine as to whether or not we're a good fit. My younger self would have said, yeah, but did you think about this? Did you think about that? And I tell younger reps all the time, you're not in sales. You're not in the business of selling. You're in the business of helping. And if the person you're sitting across from is not a good fit for any reason, move on to the next. That's okay. There's people out there who need your services. Stop trying to sell. And it's interesting because oftentimes I'll tell a prospect that, I don't know if you're a good fit for us. And what? What do you mean? Aren't you here to try to sell me something? No, I'm interviewing you just like you're interviewing me, to make sure that there's mutual benefit there. So I guess if I was talking to my younger self, I was probably a little guilty in that category once upon a time as well.
Yeah, you you can't fit everyone's needs and desires as well as they can't always fit your needs and what you offer.
Hmm.
And if you go in with the mentality that I'm going to be everything to everyone, then you're not going to be great at the one thing. And to your point, it takes maturity to be able to go and confidence to go into a room and say, yes, you guys are interviewing me, but I'm also interviewing you. This is a
Hmm.
two-way street here because I'm not going to take on a client that doesn't fit this, and that. Right. And so that is excellent advice
I
that
use
you
the I
you
use the YMCA analogy oftentimes. Well, if you sign up for the YMCA in January with your New Year's resolution and you haven't been to the YMCA and it's mid-August, you're going to cancel your membership, right? You're spending $70 a month on a membership. Now, the cost for YMCA to onboard you is pretty small. They take your photo, give you a card, and put you in their system, right? But for us, that effort to onboard a customer is significant. So if we go through that process and we onboard somebody because we've promised them sunshine and rainbows and we're not able to deliver it, well, there's real revenue impact for us. A lost customer is reputation damage. Yeah, those guys sold me a bill of goods. Well, we don't want that. So we have to be super careful in interviewing. Are you sure you want a YMCA membership? Are you sure that you see value in the things that we deliver? We need to make sure that we have the right clients and only the right clients. Organizations that don't, that we're forcing our value upon, well, they're gonna recognize that if they were sold, so to speak, and they're gonna cancel their membership with us, so to speak, using that YMCA analogy.
mm,
So our job as advocates for the business is to listen very, very close and ask the right questions and not sell at all, but simply examine and together determine as to whether or not we're a good fit.
absolutely. And I'm in the same boat. I've had a couple of clients start the EOS process and then bow out after a couple of sessions because they weren't in my target market. And I tried to make an exception. I'm like, no, they're different. No, they'll be able to make it through. And what happens? Either they ran out of money, they couldn't afford the process, or they just didn't want to be disciplined. They
Hmm.
weren't the right size of company. And sticking to your target market, sticking to the things that you need to see in a potential client is ultra important for that long-term success and just to not waste anybody's time. Well, moving right along here, name of the podcast is Willpower.
Yeah.
Jason, what does willpower mean to you?
Boy, that's a good question. I think, I used to run marathons. So, I think about that. There's pain and suffering sometimes that takes place in the path to a righteous end. And in the marathon runners will roll their eyes when I say this, but there's two halves to every marathon, right? There's the first 20 miles and the last six, because that mental toughness that it takes to push beyond complete physical exhaustion, that's where willpower comes in. And I love the name, by the way. It's such a natural play. You lucky dog. You've got such a cool name. But
Thank
it's
you.
it's sometimes it's making the hard choices, the well thought through hard choices that are going to result in a good outcome for everybody. And sometimes you outgrow people professionally inside of an organization. Sometimes you need to make some changes in path to that, and that creates some heartache and some headache. But if you've got a good long-term vision and you know where you're going, if you've taken the time to really think through your 1, 3, 5, 10 year, again using EOS terms there, then you know where you're going, and you're less likely to flap in the wind like an untethered sail, right? So those things are sometimes the embodiment of willpower. If you don't know where you're going, you'll get off track and you won't even know you're off track. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I guess that would be my example, maybe leading by example.
Mm.
You can't you can't ask people to do things that you're not willing to do on your own. And
Mm.
the resilience to bounce back when you are brought off course a little bit. I think if I was asked, well, I guess I was asked, hey, what's willpower? Those are the things that I'd learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love so much of what you said. And, to your marathon analogy, you have the starting line and you have the finish line. And what happens in between, how you get from start to finish, is willpower, right? Like when you get to mile 20, things are hard, your whole body hurts, you're soaked in sweat. You're like, I
Yeah.
don't know if I can make it 2 more steps, much less 6 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes every ounce of energy and just sheer will to get to that finish line. That's willpower. And in an organization, we're here right now, 10 year, this is where we want to be. What's in the middle? Discipline and accountability, the
Mm-hmm.
willpower to see that vision through, to understand our why and always come back to our why in order to have the willpower to get to where we want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, I don't want to understate the importance of training in the marathon, right? Because
Mm,
if you don't train, if you don't plan, I love the saying of if you don't plan, or if you fail to plan, you plan on failing.
mm,
So much of what a business practitioner does, myself included, is thinking about vision, thinking about goals and aspirations, and then doing the things you need to do to get there. You don't sign up for a marathon on race day and say, "Hey, by golly, I'm going to go after it." You gotta
mm.
spend a whole lot of time beating the bricks before you're ready for that mental toughness piece that comes along with it.
Absolutely. All right. So then my last question for you as we start to wrap this up, Jason, what's a favorite quote or motto that you live by?
That's a decent one. If you plan to fail, you fail to plan, or if other way
Mm,
around. If you know what I mean, I said it twice. But
yes.
I don't know, another big piece, motto. As a matter of fact, I've got it taped on the side of my monitor over here. I'm 52 years old, Will, and I still give myself daily reminders. But is what you're doing right now the best possible use of your time? I literally have that written on a post-it note on the side of my monitor over here because everybody needs daily reminders as to, is what you're doing going to help you accomplish your goals? And maybe that's not a motto that is a recognized one, but it's my motto. My kids, my my peers here at Pro Resources, they roll their eyes. They'll pop in and they'll talk for a couple minutes, and I'll just cut them off and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I got a couple things I gotta take care of here." But time management, I think people let the day escape them, day after day after day after day, and they find themselves not making any progress in life because they aren't disciplined in how they manage their time. So again, that doesn't rattle off the tongue like some of the other famous mottos that are out there, but it's probably my life's motto.
That's amazing, Jason, because you're right. People can be really busy and not very productive, right? And so, actually taking the time to evaluate where your time is best spent, taking that time becomes a cheat code for your life because you're able to make massive jumps by doing the right things. If you're
Hmm.
not doing the right things, if you're setting up meetings with people that aren't getting you closer to your dreams, you can be spending a lot of time in meetings, but
Hmm.
nothing is happening. You're not gaining any traction. So, actually spending the time to assess where your time is best spent and to look back at what you've been doing. Was my
Hmm.
time best spent here?
Yeah, yeah. You almost have to do an annual or biannual audit. Things are pretty quiet around the Christmas time, turn of the year, anyways. So I always, first of all, I try to do a good job of taking notes on because it's hard to remember what I had for lunch yesterday. Not to mention what I did in February, the year prior. Christmas rolls around, I always take the time to do a year in review audit. Okay, how did I do against my goals? First of all, have some goals, right? Write them down. If you write down your goals, then you have at the end of the year, you can either say, hey, self, good job, or not so good job. And whether you did or didn't accomplish your goals, every year you should audit. How did I spend my time? What worked? What didn't? Why did I exceed or why did I fall short of my goals in each of the categories in which I create those goals? And yeah, I'm with you, Will. That audit is and that reflection time is that's probably the most productive time I spend all year long is that time in reflection.
Yes. Well, I it's such a powerful exercise. And if you don't do
Mhm.
that, then again, you're kind of just going along, not really having any idea of the progress you made, not taking the time to evaluate what's working, what's not working. I mean, we call them clarity breaks at EOS, but you have to
Yeah.
have scheduled clarity breaks throughout the year and obviously the big annual one in order to make sure that you are on pace and doing the right things to achieve wherever it is that you want to go. So
Yeah.
Jason, I love this episode, man. I appreciate you and appreciate the conversation. Where can people find out more about you and Pro Resources?
Com is a great place to learn a little bit more about our business. Anybody can track me down. My cell phone number is that's just the number I use for all business activity. It's 701 200 1400 701 200 1400 or otherwise proresourceshr.com. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn and all the other socials if you want to track me down that way too.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, brother. You take care.
Sounds good. Thanks, Will.
All right. See ya.